Okay, so in the last video, what we have discussed is the organization-wide default, and that's the starting of the security inside Salesforce. In this video, we will see if your organization-wide default is private, which will be the case in most of the project. Your main object organization-wide default would be definitely private. Let's say the account object organization-wide default will be private, or let's say the lead will be private, or they might have some custom object where they're actually capturing the customer data that might be private. So the main object would be definitely private. And now we will see if the organization wide default is private, what are the situation that may come and how do we solve those situation with Salesforce. Okay, so let's begin. Before we discuss about the next steps that's going to happen the moment you make organization wide default is private, let me talk about a small thing here. Do you see one option called control by parent? So far we know what is private, what is public, even what is public read write and transfer, right? But what do you mean by this control by parent? Let me tell you this, and if possible please note it down. I'm pretty sure that you are noting down every single point that I'm discussing in the video in a paper. That would be really helpful for you, right? So please note down this point. The point here is we I think we made head office and outlet, where head office was the parent and outlet was the child in the master detail relationship. Remember, in the master detailed relationship, the child object can never and ever have its own organization wide default setting. It means the child object will always inherit the organization wide default setting of its parent. Let me show you this. If you go and check the organization wide default of outlet, see this is control by parent. What do you mean by control by parent? It means outlet and head office, these two objects are in a master detail relationship, and outlet object is the detail or the child. And that's the reason why outlet object cannot have its own independent organization wide default setting. It will always inherit the organization wide default of its parent, which is nothing but public read and write. If you change the OWD of head office as, let's say, private, the outlet also will behave like private only, because the same thing whatever you change over there in the head office will be inherited by outlet. Now you might get a questions. Okay, understand these questions and try to answer what would be the solution for this. Okay, so let's say you have an object called outlet, which is the child of head office. Okay, head office is the parent, and it is in a master data relationship. Now you have another parent of outlet called, let's say, account. Correct, and account is also in a master data relationship with outlet. Now the question is, outlet will never have its own organization wide default setting. That's agreed. Whose organization wide default setting will be inherited in this case? Because outlet now have two master detail the relationship. One is with head office and one is with account. So do you think head office's organization wide default will be inherited by outlet, or the account organization wide default will be inherited by outlet? Which one? Remember here, the primary relationship, you know what is primary relationship? Let's say outlet and head office, this relationship has been created first. That's the primary relationship, and this is the secondary one. This relationship has been created after the first one. So always remember, Salesforce will allow the child object to inherit the organization wide default of the primary object, primary relationship parent object, and this is nothing but the primary one. So always the organization wide default of head office will be inherited by outlet. All right, so this is what you have to note it down for the case of master detail. See, in the lookup, as I said, it is just an independent relationship. There is no dependency. So this doesn't come in the lookup. But for master detail, this control by parent is one of the important thing that you might experience in the certification as well. Okay. So let's move on to the next topic. Okay. Now assume that your organization wide default of lead is private. This is private. Okay. Now we have a second situation here. Understand the situation, okay? And then we will talk about it. By the way, let me just remove all the other users and put here testing user, okay? Because that's the live user that I have. So I have one user called Rajesh, another user called testing user. Cool. Assume that Rajesh and testing user both are sales executive. Both are the real business users. Hmm? And they are not able to see each other's data because the organization wide default is private. Fair enough. But here we got a situation. The situation is, let's say testing user has no more lead to work with, and right, every business user has a target to fulfill every month. Suppose testing user has to fulfill the target for this month, but unfortunately he doesn't have any potential lead that he can work with and probably get that revenue out. So this testing user is actually requesting Rajesh, right? That, hey Rajesh, I know you have few potential lead that you own, right? But because of some reason, I mean, these are the business user, right? They don't know what is private, what is organization wide default, right? So let's say testing user is asking Rajesh that due to some reason I don't see the leads that you own, right? So can you please share few of your potential lead with me? What I'll do is I will talk to them. If I find these are helpful, I will ask you to change the ownership of those leads to myself. Now understand this. There are two things. One, Rajesh can transfer the lead to testing user. What do you mean by transfer the lead? Rajesh can actually change the ownership from Rajesh to testing user. And the moment the Rajesh transfer the lead, what will happen? The moment Rajesh change the ownership from Rajesh to testing user, Rajesh is no more the owner of the record. Now the new owner is testing user. So that record will not be accessed by Rajesh anymore because the new owner is testing user and Rajesh is no more an owner. Got it? That's the case of private. Lead organization wide default is private. Okay, remember that. Now the thing is, testing user is not asking Rajesh to change the ownership. He's asking, okay, I don't want you to change the ownership as of now because I don't know if the leads are potential or not. What you do is, this month you share few like 10 potential lead which you find these are pretty good enough with me, and I will talk to them. And once I talk to them, probably you can change the ownership to me if I tell you later. Or once I talk to them, probably I need to update their status. Possible, right? How do you do this? Your organization wide default is private. Testing user can definitely request Rajesh. How do you think this can be done? Let me give you one more scenario. The more and more scenarios you'll be hearing, the concept will be more clear. Okay, let's say this is a, again, loan management company. Rajesh is the sales executive who onboard the leads and make sure they get the loan. Testing user is the background verification person, suppose the person who is to validate the background. Cool. Now testing user is not able to access the data. Why? Because it is private, and the ownership definitely will be remain to Rajesh only. Rajesh has onboard a lead who is looking for some personal loan. Do you think the ownership will go to testing user? Because testing user is just a background verification person this time, okay, for this example. So the ownership will remain to Rajesh only, but Rajesh would like to give access to testing user of that private lead. In this case, how do you do it? So to solve this scenario, Salesforce has something called manual sharing. What is that? Manual sharing. You know how the manual sharing works. Let me just log in as Rajesh here, and or you can log in as testing user, whatever. You see here, Whenever you go to any lead, let's say there's a lead named Peter Parker, and this lead, when you open, there's a button called sharing. This is called manual sharing, guys. This manual sharing is definitely useful for the business user in this kind of situation where they don't want to change the owner, but the owner wants to share that record access to someone else. In this case, this manual sharing button will be helpful. Let me give you one more scenario. So let's say the lead name is Alex and the lead owner is Rajesh. So this lead named Alex is owned by Rajesh. Correct. Now the scenario is, once Rajesh has onboarded Alex as a lead, there is a team, okay, team 1, and let's say team 2 and team 3. Team 1, team 2 and team 3, there are 3 teams. Team 1, what they do is they just check the house property, okay. The team 1 will go and check if Alex has his own property or not. Once this has been checked, the team 2 will go and check the credit score. The team 2 will go and check whether the lead named Alex has proper credit score or not to avail that loan. Once that has been checked, this will go to team 3. Let's say team 3's job is to check, is there any bad loan? The team 3 will go and check, is there any bad loan been taken by Alex? If it is, then they will reject Alex to take the next loan. Right? So there are now 3 teams who check first the house, the property. Team 1 will check the property first. Team 2 will check the credit score, and team 3 will check if there is any bad loan or not. And guess what? Everything can be done if this team people has access to the Salesforce org. So let's say in this team 1, okay, everybody who is there, there are suppose 5 members in the team 1. There are again suppose another 5 member in team 2. Okay, another 5 member in team 3. All right. Now these 15 members suppose are the users, like how I have onboarded testing user, they are the users. Now the problem is this, there are 2 scenarios, right? In the first situation, what we have discussed is, we have discussed how a particular lead can be shared with an individual person, correct? As a sales user, I can share my lead to another sales user. Probably next month he can share his lead with me. And in the second scenario, we are seeing how a lead supposed to be shared with a particular team. In both these scenarios, right? If you see, one thing is the lead owner will remain same. Owner will always be Rajesh, right? You're not changing the owner, correct? Owner is Rajesh, but you're giving access to this team 1, to this team 2, to this team 3, or that individual person, so that they can view the data, or they maybe after the view they can change the status, so they can update the data. Got it? Your organization wide, so I'm just repeating the entire story, okay? Your organization wide default of lead is private. Now the lead is being owned by Rajesh, and Rajesh wants to share that lead to team 1, team 2 and team 3. How do you do this? We will now go ahead and implement this inside Salesforce, and we'll see how can we do this. Again, really sorry for the bad handwriting. Okay, now we are considering the first scenario where this record supposed to be shared with a particular user. Okay, how can you do it? You have a sharing button over here. Now if you click on this, I don't see the sharing button. Can you guess why? What is the reason I am not able to see this sharing button over here? By the way, I have logged in as a testing user. The owner is Rajesh. I supposed to see the button called sharing, which will help me to share the record with some individual person. Now, what is the reason I'm not able to see it? Check this out and tell me if you have guessed it correctly. See, the lead organization wide default is public read and write. If it is public read and write, then what is the use of sharing and all? Anyway, every single person in this org will be able to see and edit all the data, right? So there's no need of sharing. The need of sharing will come only when your organization wide default is private or public read only. Correct. So I'll just quickly refresh this page and change the organization wide default setting to private. Okay, so I made the organization wide default of lead back to private. Now I'll go back to the testing users. I've logged in here as testing user. And if I go to leads, I have only one lead so far created named Ali, and the logged in user, testing user, is the owner of that lead. Okay, now let's say this testing user wants to share this particular record with a particular user. How do you do it? If you go to this drop down, you have this sharing button available now. Because the organization wide default is private, there's a need of sharing. Nobody else apart from the owner can see the data, so there's a need of sharing. That's why the sharing button is there. So if you click on the sharing button, here we'll be able to select anybody you wants to share the record with. Let me share the record with a user named security user. That's a dummy user Salesforce created. And by the way, you can share the record with multiple users here. Okay, so you select security user, or you select one more user named Rajesh Chatterjee, and you'll be able to share the record with. Now the question is whether testing user who own that lead name Ali wants to give Rajesh or the security user access to edit or to read only. That's something you have to define here. So let's say I'm giving only read access. Save. Now what will happen? Even though the organization wide default is private, even though your organization wide default is private and the record is owned by testing user, still Rajesh Chatterjee and the security user will be able to view the data. You get it? You will be able to view the data. I cannot test it because security user I cannot log in, and Rajesh Chatterjee is the system admin, so he will have all the access. Okay, so you cannot test it as Rajesh Chatterjee. But ideally, if that happens, if you go back to the sharing button, you can also check. If you want to check, okay, with how many user this record has been shared, you can click on this edit button. You can see all the history. This record is been shared with Rajesh with read-only access. It's been shared with security user, again with read-only access, and it's been shared with testing user with all the access. Why all the access? Because testing user is the owner of the data. Makes sense? And if testing user wants, you can change the access from read-only to something else. That's all pretty much about manual sharing. Okay, now we're going to talk about the second scenario. We remember the second scenario? The second scenario is where we discuss this, right? Alex is the lead, Rajesh is the owner, and there are teams. Now I'm going to go and create these teams. Okay, team 1, team 2, team 3. I don't have like five users, but I'm just going to go and create these team first. Let me tell you this. In Salesforce, we have something called public group. What is that? Public group. We as an admin create public groups. Okay, let's just go and create a public group. If you search here as an admin, if you search here public groups, you'll see something called public group in the search section. There is no group created so far. Let me create the first group called team 1. You can actually select who will be the user inside the public group, and when you select who will be the user inside the public group, you get to see these options. We haven't explored yet what is role and subordinate, which will be the next chapter, but you can actually include any public group or any direct user inside this group. Let me just select few users. I'm selecting integration user Rajesh Chatterjee. Okay, these two users I'm selecting as team 1. Done. Let's create the team 2 quickly. Team 2, and here I'm selecting. Okay, check this out. In the team 2, I want everybody from team 1 to be there, so selected the public group, you see here. And in the team 2, I want testing user also to be there, so I have selected group 1, I mean team 1 plus testing user in the team 2. Like that I can create team 3 as well. I'm not creating team 3. This 2 team is good enough for me to test it. Now I will go back to the same page. Let's say this particular lead named Ali, testing user own that lead. Okay. And is already been shared with two different individual user. Now testing user wants to share this record with the team 1 and team 2. How are you going to do? Click here, click on the same sharing button, and when you click on the sharing button, you see there's a drop down, small drop down. Click here, and there's something called public group. This is an important question that you can expect in the certification, that in the manual sharing, what are the options that you get to share the record with? So you can share the record either with some user individually, which we have already seen in the past. And now we are going to share the record with the public group, the team 1 and team 2. We can also share the record with role and role subordinate. What is this two option we're going to explore after this. So just remember this 4 option, please. Okay. Select the public group. What is the public group name? I think team 1. If you search team, you'll see all the public group that has been onboarded inside this system. Select team 1 and save. Clear? Now look into the entire story. Okay. This manual sharing, if you see this record named Ali, if you go here in the sharing button and click on this edit button, check this out. This record has been shared with Rajesh, security user, team 1, testing users. All right, and with all these access, if you want to go and check what are the members inside the team 1, you can definitely go to the setup and search with public group, go to the team 1 and see the members. That's all about manual sharing. So if I gist everything, see, organization wide default, if it is private, then only this manual sharing will come into the picture. By the way, one more question I have to ask you before I just wrap up this manual sharing session. Please tell me one more thing here. Let's say your organization wide default of lead is public read only. Understand this, okay? Your organization wide default of lead is public read only. Now, do you think the manual sharing option will be there in the picture? If your organization wide default of lead is public read only, do you think this guy, the testing user, if I refresh the page, will still be able to manually share the record? And do you think there's a need first? If your organization wide default is public read only, do you think there's a need of manual sharing? I think you have already guessed it. Yes, there is a need, because it's public read only, which means other user, they can only view. They cannot edit it. What if the team 1 people said, you know what, I'm done with the background check, I have to update the status of the lead. Can they do it? No, they cannot, because the owner can have access to everything. I mean, the owner can do everything for the data, but others, because it is read only, can only view the data. They cannot update anything. Now, how can the team 1 team can actually update that status of the lead? They cannot do it. So for that reason, if your organization wide default is public read only, still you will have the manual sharing option available, because you can share the record with, let's say, team 2. I'm sharing. Sorry, you have to select here public group, and then you have to search with team 2. So now I can share the record with team 2 with read and write access. I hope this 2 point is very clear, right? If your organization wide default is private or public read only, your manual sharing option will come into the picture. All right, this is what about manual sharing. And the next video, we're going to talk about automatic sharing. All right, see you in the next video.